Western Asia, or simply West Asia. It is the westernmost sub-region of Asia. It is a region at the crossroads between Asia, Africa, and Europe, and since centuries, the scene for cultural exchange, trade, and warlike conflicts. The area has seen many rulers, from the Phoenicians, the Sumerians, the Parthians and Romans, to the Ottomans, Arabs, and Persians, and in recent history, the British and the French. The region includes the ancient landscapes of the Fertile Crescent, where the settled farming first emerged. It was the site of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization within the Tigris-Euphrates river system. Numerically, Western Asia is predominantly Arab, Persian, Turkish, and the dominating languages are correspondingly Arabic, Persian, and Turkish, each with of the order of 70 million speakers, followed by smaller communities of Kurdish, Azerbaijani, Hebrew, Armenian, and Aramaic. The dominance of Arabic and Turkish is the result of the medieval Arab and Turkic invasions, beginning with the Islamic conquests of the 7th century AD. There are three major religions in West Asia: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. The economies of the Middle East range from very poor countries to extremely wealthy nations. Some countries in the Middle East are heavily dependent on exporting only oil and oil-related products. Industries in the Middle East or the West Asia region include oil and oil-related products, agricultural products like cotton, cattle, and dairies, textiles and leather products. Israel is in the top 10 of the world's biggest arms exporters. Western Asia was in use as a geographical term in the early 19th century, even before the Near East became current as a geopolitical concept. In the context of the history of classical antiquity, Western Asia could mean the part of Asia known in classical antiquity, as opposed to the reaches of interior of Asia. In the 20th century, Western Asia was used to denote a rough geographical era in the fields of archaeology and ancient history, especially as a shorthand for the Fertile Crescent, including ancient Egypt, for the purposes of comparing the early civilizations of Egypt and the former. The Middle East is a term that the West likes to use for Western Asia, and the only reason to be still calling the region to stop Asia from acknowledging its continental identity, which is something that has always been unwanted by the West. Though both West Asia and Middle East are broadly generalized terms for an area that is diverse, West Asia is more neutral than Middle East. 21st century Middle Eastern literature, to include Arabic, Persian, and Turkish literature, encompass a rich variety of genres, whose maturation has profited from internal and external influences upon these literature over the past 14 centuries. Modern Arabic literature addresses the full range of human experience, often through a realist approach that employs the Arabic language in ways ranging from the most formal to the most colloquial. While Turkish and Persian literatures have both followed individual trajectories since the modern period, they too evince a similar range with respect to genre and employment of language. Although today these three literatures appear as discrete entities, they share a long early religious, cultural, and political history. While pre-Islamic Persian and Turkish literatures would prove influential when taken up by writers in the first few centuries after Islam, pre-Islamic Arabic literature provided the first literary model. Pre-Islamic Arabic literature is characterized by the Muwalyagat, a collection of poems from the Arabian Peninsula, renowned for their beauty. These poems are odes to the sorrows of lost love, using such tropes as abandoned campsites to evoke memories of a beloved. That of Imru al-Qais, perhaps the best known, begins, "Come, let us cry from the remembrance of a love and a home." Although poetic themes have changed over the centuries, the ode or qasida has enjoyed continuing popularity through the 20th century. Arabic literature. It is the writing produced both prose and poetry, of course by speakers of the Arabic language. It does not usually include works written using the Arabic alphabet but not in the Arabic language, such as Persian literature and Urdu literature. The Arabic word used for literature is adab, which is derived from a word meaning to invite someone for a meal, and it implies politeness, culture, and enrichment. Arabic literature emerged in the 6th century, with only fragments of the written language appearing before then. It was the Quran in the 7th century which would have the greatest lasting effect on the Arabic culture and its literature. Arabic literature flourished during the Islamic Golden Age and continues to the present day. The most famous example of Arabic fiction is the Book of 1001 Nights, or the Arabian Nights, easily the best known of all Arabic literature and which still affects many of the ideas non-Arabs have about Arabic culture. Although regarded as primarily Arabic, it was in fact developed from a Persian work, and the stories in turn may have their roots in India. Poetry is the greatest expression of literary art that Arabs have mastered in Arabic poetry. This sophisticated rhythmic literature is a form of preservation of history, traditions, and social values. It is one of the most important aspects of Arab culture, especially in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states. The best example that shows the importance of poetry in Arab culture is probably the Muwalyagat. During pre-Islam era, the Muwalyagat are some of the finest Arabic odes that were written down in golden letters on scrolls and hung inside the Kaaba walls in Mecca, the holiest place for Arabs even before Islam. This selection of poems enjoys a unique position in Arabic literature, representing the greatest of early Arabic poetry. These poems are included in Arabic literature book in schools in most parts of the Arab world. Up next is a part of the poem as its example. Poetry is still celebrated at almost all festivals and national celebrations in Saudi Arabia as the annual festival of Al-Janadriya. There are even several poetry competition television series such as Shair al-Million. The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. This work is actually written in English, but it is Arabic literature. Gibran, who came from a poor Lebanese Christian family, moved to the United States in the 19th century. He and his contemporaries formed what became known as the Exile School and wrote their works in both English and Arabic. Take time to pause the video to read some of its parts. The Prophet is made up of 26 poetic essays on the human condition, spoken by a mystical figure who is about to depart on a journey. A crowd gathers round him on the quayside and asks for insights into the human condition on love, money, children, work, clothes. His answers form a spiritual, philosophical view of living that has enchanted readers around the world ever since it was first published in 1923. Persian literature. Persian literature differs from the common definitions of literature in that it is not confined to lyrical compositions, to poetry or imaginative prose, because the central elements of these appear in all written works of the Persians. Histories or medical discourses, religious texts, or philosophical commentary are considered literature, in the artistic sense, as much as any poem or fictional tale. Poetry was regarded as the highest form of artistic expression by the ancient and medieval Persians, and so informs any other medium. The literature of Persia is among the oldest in the world, spanning thousands of years, and has influenced the literary works of many other cultures. The greatest and most influential work is the Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings, written by the poet Abul Qasim Ferdowsi between 977 to 1010 CE. The Shahnameh epitomizes the spirit of Persian literature up through the present day, in that it preserves the ancient stories of the past while keeping them relevant for every new generation who reads them. The same spirit of preservation and novelty characterizing Ferdowsi's work is recognized in the artistic efforts of modern day. As noted, poetry also informs Persian prose histories, religious commentary, criticism, and biographies, as well as translations of works from other languages. The poetic form, however, what one would understand as poetry, was always considered the highest form of expression and reached its height in the 12th and 15th century CE through the works of Persian poets drawing on the traditions and symbolisms of Sufism and the power of divine and human love to give meaning to one's life. By the way, Sufism is the mystical approach to the practice of Islam. Among the best-known Persian poets in the West, and easily the most popular throughout the 20th century CE, is none other than Omar Khayyam, whose Rubaiyat, in the English version by the poet Edward Fitzgerald, remains among the most oft-quoted works in world literature, even though in Persian tradition, Khayyam is regarded as a great scientist and mathematician and only a minor poet. The greatest artist of the Persian poetic tradition is considered Hafez Shiraz, also given as Hafez and Hafez Shiraz, who combined the literary developments of the past with his own insight to produce some of the most memorable and evocative works not only in Persian but in world literature. Although many of Hafiz's symbols and literary conceits were once considered original, they were used earlier by Rodaki and those who came after him. Hafiz's poem, "Now is the Time," begins with the lines, The poet here encourages an honest assessment of one's self, not bound by religious, cultural, or familiar traditions in recognizing the divine, characterized as love. Similar themes were addressed by Rodaki, who emphasizes the importance of love over ritual in the lines. Rumi also explores the theme of transcendent love in depth in many of his poems, emphasizing the necessity of moving beyond the known and accepted world, including religious strictures, to experience the ultimate reality of love. His poem, "The Gift of Water," concludes with the lines, "Being open to love in all its forms is a central message of Persian literature, no matter what form of expression it takes. In Hafiz's works, this theme is thought by many scholars to be developed mostly eloquently with the highest degree of artistry, giving him the honor of being named the greatest Persian poet." Turkish literature. Turkish literature comprises oral compositions and written texts in Turkic languages. The Ottoman and Azeri forms of Turkish have become the basis of much of the written corpus and highly influenced by Persian and Arabic literature, and it is using the Ottoman Turkish alphabet. Throughout most of its history, Turkish literature has been rather sharply divided into two different traditions. The first of these two traditions is Turkish folk literature, and the other is Turkish written literature. For most of the history of Turkish literature, the salient difference between the folk and the written traditions has been the variety of language employed. In folk poetry, which is by far the tradition's dominant genre, this basic fact led to two major consequences in terms of poetic style. First, folk poetry made use of syllabic verse as opposed to the qualitative verse employed in the written poetic tradition. Second, the basic structural unit of folk poetry became the quatrain, rather than the couplets, more commonly employed in written poetry. The literature of the village, the countryside, and the lower classes was based on a long tradition of Turkic poetry predating Islam. Popular poetry employed syllable counting rhythms, which identified groups of syllables separated by minor caesuras. For example, the pattern 4 and 4 and 3 syllables. The oldest genre of Turkish literature is the heroic epic, of which the prime example is the Kitab-i Didi Korkut, the Book of My Grandfather Korkut, which has survived in two 16th century manuscripts. The actual date of the work is unknown. The style of the epic, which consists of prose narrative mixed with verse speeches, suggests oral composition. The language of the text is Uguz Turkish, containing both Anatolian and Azerbaijani elements. There is no overall narrative framework, but most of the 12 tales revolve around legendary Urgoz heroes. By the middle of the 13th century, mystical Sufi poetry had become a major branch of Turkish literature, with Sufi poets working primarily in Anatolian Turkish. One of the two well-known poets of the 13th and 14th centuries was Asik Pasa, author of the Garib Nami, the Book of the Stranger, a didactic poem of some 11,000 couplets that explores philosophical and moral themes. The growth during the 16th and 17th centuries of this type of poetry, which was intended to be sung in the Dhikr ceremony, was a function of the monopoly of mysticism held by the Sufi brotherhoods of that era. The most outstanding representative of this tradition is Niyazi Misri, a 17th century poet of the Halviti Tariqat. His verse was enormously popular in his lifetime and throughout the 18th century. Like Yunus Emre, Niyazi Misri was able to express subtle mystical insights using the very simple language. This has been Mr. Orlando P. Vinculado Jr. Thank you so much for tuning in. Here are my references.